Last week we were talking about obedience and how God blesses obedience. And I had shared with you about going to Pittsburgh and crying for 3 days as I drove. I talked to you about going to Africa, not wanting to go, but feeling God's nudge and God's call. And the blessings that came from that, because that's where I met my wife, Paula. That's where we were able to be blessed with 4 amazing sons and 3 amazing daughter-in-laws and 4 great grandkids. More to come, I hope, but we'll see. And with that, I want to share with you just part of my blessing. So with that, I have something very special. I'd like my son, who has come to visit all the way from Utah, is with us today. Come on.
All right.
This is my son with whom I am well pleased. Has come from Utah. And the other thing that's really nice is he brought his lovely wife, my daughter-in-law, and their 2 kids. So come on up, Reta. This is part of the blessing from being obedient.
Amen. Amen.
Because I didn't want to go to Pittsburgh. I didn't want to go to Africa. But look what I have. And last night, the whole family was sitting around our dining room table, playing games, laughing, enjoying television. I think it was after midnight. I finally says, y'all got to go to bed. I have to work tomorrow. So the blessings that came from that just last night, all of us being together, was just amazing. And so you're getting to see 2 of my blessings because of obedience. And today we have Reta is going to share her testimony with us, and you are going to be blessed from that. And you'll hear what God has done in her and through her, and what this family is becoming and moving towards, and watching God just do amazing things. And to think it started with one act of saying,
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. BLA then 1K. In my culture, that means blessings. And it also means my heart is pure. So blessings to everyone that's watching. And just so you know, my heart is pure. Amen. My name is Reta Wilson. I am from Monrovia, Liberia. My native name is Kou, K-O-U. My nickname is Noosh. That's what my mother and brother calls me. And when they're super mad at me, they emphasize on that, right? So Liberia, that's where I'm from. I want to share my testimony with you guys this morning to let you know how God has blessed me and blessed my family. So there was a war in Liberia from 1989 to 2003. My whole family was in the war. We lived in the country part of Liberia, and it was pretty intense. So I have 2 adopted brothers. Jarek, we found him crying over his mom's dead body. My second adopted brother name is Amirik, and his mother wanted to sell him. My mother wouldn't buy him, so she gave him to us. My blood brother name is Robert. We call him Jion. That's his native name. And my father left our family because he wanted to marry to more than 1 wives. My mother didn't want that, so he kind of left us. And so it was me, my blood brother, Robert, we call him Jim, and then also my 2 adopted brothers. The rebels, if you guys know the history of Liberia, it was a civil war. The rebels would come And every time they would come and attack our village, we were in the house praying. We were in our hut praying. Imagine a hut. You know, a little visual of the hut we lived in was just sticks and then whatever leaves, a shelter we can put between those sticks. That's where we slept. And I never understood why my mom wouldn't run. And we prayed the whole time. They came. And we held hands and prayed. And nothing ever happened to us. This one time we decided to run, we all came back and my mother wasn't there. And you know, as a little girl, you're attached to your mother. She was the only thing we had because my father left. And I waited, I'm like, she's gonna come back. And this was the one time we decided to run. She didn't come back. Days came, nights came and went, and my mother didn't come back. But God had a plan. He sure did. My mother came to the United States on a visiting visa. Her visiting visa was expired. The American government found her and said, Dorothy, you're illegal. So we need to deport you back to Liberia. But because there's a civil war in your country and you have kids, we are going to give you a chance to fight. She fought, got an attorney, she got an asylum. And we got a call. 2 years later, your mom's in America. My mother took a leap of faith. And those nights and days I didn't see her, she had a plan. And every single time we held hands and prayed, she had a plan. And so the one time we decided to run, she knew it was her chance. We got a call, Mommy's in America. It was so exciting. I was in shock. You know how you know in your heart that she's alive, but you can't prove it physically?
Yeah.
She was alive fighting for us. She was able to bring me because I was a little girl. She obviously wasn't able to bring my 2 adopted brothers because they weren't blood. They were adopted by God because she saved their lives. My blood brother, Robert, was too old. The embassy in Liberia wouldn't let him come because he had to file for himself as a man, and she couldn't file for him as her child. It was really hard to leave Robert because the rebels really wanted him to join them. Robert was my rock. My father wasn't there. He was my everything. My mother told me he ran with me all the time to make sure I was safe. He never put me down because he didn't want anything or nothing to happen to me. And he would never leave me. God is so good. I was able to come to the state without Robert. We sent Robert to Ghana because the rebels really tortured him. They wanted him to join and he wouldn't. They will grab him when they see him random places and put him in holes in the ground. They will beat him and torture him, but he wouldn't give in. So when it was my time to come to the States, I was really worried about him. But my mother had a plan. She's always had a plan because she had put her faith in God. So there was a plan. And even at the moments when we thought we weren't going to live, she knew. She always had a plan. She sent Robert to Ghana, to the refugee camp. He had 3 attempts. The 3rd time he made it. The first 2 times she put him on the ship, there was attacks and he couldn't make it, but he finally made it to the refugee camp in Ghana. But before he went to Ghana, he had me thinking he was gonna come to the United States with me. We got all ready to go on the plane. And he got all dressed up that day like we were going together. And in his heart, he knew it wasn't his time. I remember walking up those stairs. And when I got to the top, I turned around and he was at the bottom. He said a short time, Noosh, go ahead. I got on the plane and I left him. But I trust in God. I trust in God because he had got us this far. My mother made it. And it was because of her courage. I got to the United States and met my mother. My brother was in the refugee camps. My 2 adopted brothers was left in Africa, and this was my new life. What a blessing. We made it out of hell. Went to school in DC, Gaithersburg, Maryland, and in 2008, I came to Utah. While I was in DC, I met a family. Her husband was a scientist for the government. He did DNA. And we lived in a pretty bad neighborhood in DC. And I told her, if I come watch your kids and you feed me, I will help you because your husband's not home. And that was our arrangement. And they became family. I was gonna graduate in 2008, and she says, Rita, you're a blessing. You taught our kids that it doesn't matter where you come from. Whatever you want in life, you have to fight for it. They prayed and just had this inspiration that I needed to come to Utah. They wrote me an $11,000 check to go to Weber State. And we prayed. They paid my first 2-year tuition. And after 2 years, I was on my own, and I had to finish school and figure things out that way. But before I left to come to Utah, there was a period of time where I didn't want to leave because I didn't want to leave my mother alone. And we have been fighting to bring my brother here. Saved money all my summers. I worked really hard. Didn't use none of that money. And a month before I was supposed to come, my brother got granted to come to the United States. He got off the plane, kissed the ground, and said, I'm free. You guys tell me that's not God. What is that? Robert is in DC right now. Went to Harvard University, got his bachelor's in biology. He's in medical school. He's going to be a surgical doctor in a year and a half. And I am here, alive. God is so good. You walk outside and look up in the sky and tell me that's man-made. There's no way. I am so blessed. And because my mother took a chance, that woman always has her Bible. Just so grateful and so blessed. Thank you for listening.
All right, I'm going to ask her some questions as we go. So move your chair over. I'm going to bring another chair in. And if you can put that slide back up of Africa. I want you to see where Liberia is. And and then you have Ivory Coast, and then you have Ghana. That's where her brother had to go all that distance to get into a refugee camp. If you look up here, there's a little teeny strip called the Gambia. And I want you to note that because we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But I want to go back and I want to hear a little bit more about what it was like. You say you lived in a stick hut. What you said sticks and some leaves and stuff you put around. How big was this hut?
Maybe 10 by 10.
Square, round?
Round.
So
very small.
And how many people were in there?
It was me, my mother, my 2 adopted brothers, and Robert.
So there's 2, 3, 4, 5 people in this 10-foot circular hut. What about running water?
We had wells.
What about a bathroom?
I remember a bathroom.
No such thing, honestly. And how was your food, your supply of food, and what you had?
My brother went out and hunt, and he brought food back.
So he had to hunt for you guys to
He had
eat.
to go grab food for yes.
So no catch, no food.
No catch, no food.
Oh, so there would be times, I guess, you may go to bed hungry. And
Absolutely. We had a lot of times where there was no food.
so not quite like the Hotel Hilton.
No, not at all.
And you talked about the political upheaval, the rebels and stuff. And what would you hear? How old were you when this was happening?
I was young. I mean, 5, 6. I came to the States. I was going on 8 years old when I came to the States.
Okay, so you as a 6, 7, 8-year-old would hear these rebels running through the village.
Absolutely. I still remember those sounds.
What were those sounds?
Loud. Stomping of feet. Loud.
What about
Like they're coming for you.
Yeah, and what about the people that were in there screaming and running away?
They were scared for their lives because you didn't know if you were going to make it the next day. It's fear. You're constantly living in fear.
Did you guys ever, the 3 or 4 or 5 of your family, when you would run to escape the rebels, did you ever get separated? What would you do?
Absolutely. My mother always told me, when we get separated and you can't find none of us, you pray and you'll find us.
Jeez.
And that's what I held on to. That's all I knew. And that's what I did.
Did you ever witness things that you can't share?
Yes. And I won't share it, sorry. It's too hard for me.
So some of the events were so traumatic that for you to like relive them causes anxiety. Because I'm asking this so that the people listening and here today can get a little bit of an understanding what it's like to be running from men who are shooting their guns, trying to kill me, and I'm off running, and I'm 6, 7, 8 years old. This is going on. And there had to be more than just running. And so Rita's not sharing with you some of the details because of how extreme they are, and I respect that with what's going on. You had mentioned that you pray. If you ever got separated, you would pray. Were there times that you did get separated?
Yes.
And prayer brought you guys back together? You found each other? How'd that work?
That's all I knew. That's all we did was pray.
That's all you what?
That's all we did was pray.
You didn't pick up a cell phone?
No.
And say, hey, Robert, I'm over at bush number 3.
There was no cell phones.
No cell phones.
No.
Did you put like a little pigeon and you'd fly him over? No.
No.
You just did what?
I prayed.
Prayed.
That's
Wow.
all I knew.
Can you share any specific times with Robert being tortured? What kind of stuff that was? And witnessing, did you ever witness any of that? Did you ever find him or anything that would be?
Robert
And how old is Robert at this time?
So Robert is 45.
Right now.
Yes.
But back then when he was being chased and punished and captured.
He was younger. I can't tell you exactly how old he was, but he was a teenage boy, right? And he was just strong. He was really our rock, right? And Robert felt a responsibility of taking care of me and my mother because my father left. But the rebels saw how fast and quick and strong he was. And so they wanted him to be part of them, and he wouldn't do it. And they will beat him up, right? There used to be holes in the ground they will put him in. I remember one time walking and I heard a noise, like just the noise. I'm like, what is that noise? And like, I followed the noise, and there was obviously a hole in the ground and it was covered by something, and I pulled it out. And, you know, we didn't see Robert for days. We knew the rebel took him. We knew he was strong enough to find his way back to us. And opening that hole was my brother in there. They had beat him and put him in that hole. So I don't know how many days he was in the hole for, but Robert was in that hole.
Wow. So they would kind of like bury him in the hole and cover him up. And,
yeah, just torture.
Oh,
different types of torture.
Wow. Did you ever experience any of that yourself? Any torture?
No,
your mother?
No, I've never seen my mother gotten torture. I just know that Robert was my protector. I don't remember being hurt or anything like that. Robert and my two adopted brothers, you know, they took care of their little sisters. So super blessed that I didn't get to experience that. I know other kids have, right? Blessed that I have brothers who wanted to make sure I was safe.
Help me understand. You know, we're talking about this hut. How many huts were in the village?
I couldn't tell you exactly how many, but whoever was around us. I mean, people are looking for shelters and place to sleep. You know, if you've seen videos about Africa and Liberia and poor countries like that, you know, it's wherever. Some people sleep on the ground, right? Just wherever they can find comfortable for that night.
So in your hut, did you have like a nice cement floor? And
I wish, you know.
What was it like?
It was just dirt ground.
A dirt ground.
Dirt
Did you have
ground.
a stove, like a
Nothing.
Westinghouse?
No.
GE?
No.
No. And so you're sleeping on this dirt ground in this small hut, and rebels come in, and you hear gunshots and people screaming, and you run. Is this something that was
This is normal day life.
normal everyday life?
Normal. You're running. You don't know when they're gonna come.
Oh my
You don't
goodness.
know what's gonna happen. You're running for your life.
And one day you say your mother just didn't come back.
She didn't come back because God had a plan.
God had a plan. What was going through your mind?
I had to trust what I knew, and that was in God.
Okay, you say your father left you. How old were you when your father left?
I don't remember. It's just a
So
little
really
girl.
young.
Really
Okay, so now she's got no male figure in her life, and her brother becomes that, and her two adopted brothers. Tell me about one of the adoptions.
The first adopted brother we met crying over his mom's dead body. I kind of remember that moment. My second adopted brother, mother didn't want him. She was trying to sell him. My mom's like, I'm not gonna take him for money or food but I'm not gonna give you food for him, but I would take him and take care of him if you can't.
So you ended up with an adopted brother because the mother had been shot, and there's this baby, and your mom takes him in and adopts this little boy. And the second little boy, the mom is selling.
She wanted a trade for him, basically.
Wow! And your mother says, "I'm not buying any person.
No, I'm taking him and I'll feed him.
Wow. So, in the midst of your poverty, your mom takes on 2 hungry mouths, plus the 2 she already has, no husband to provide. What lesson, what came from that? What did you learn from your mother from something like that?
You know, I've been asked what my why is. My husband's really good at asking me what my why is. And my why is to change lives.
Your why is to change
It's
lives.
to change lives. And you know, when you're changing people's lives and you're impacting them, it doesn't have to be something big and amazing. It can be something little, right? You can impact people. Anyone can do it. You can impact people in many different ways. And my mother impacted people. I want to say like, it's my core, right? My mother's awesome. So it's really my core. My mother took in people when she didn't have to. It's just her heart. And I think because, you know, when you're in an environment where everyone is struggling, right? It's the right thing to do. I do remember a story that I want to share. And I don't remember exactly like where the bags of rice came from, but there was a point where we had a lot of rice and there were people lined up in front of our hut and my mom had me dishing out rice to people. And, you know, some people had it in their hands or their shirts or whatever they may have in front of them. And there was a lady that came and told her, Dorothy, you're crazy. The war is here. We barely have nothing to eat, and you are giving out all of this food. And my mother told her, we're all struggling, and I don't care. Whoever wants rice, get in line, and we will dish out to you. So when you hear that story, my mother's heart is pure. She cares, right? And so like I look at myself and what I do on a daily basis. And it's because of her. It's the lesson she taught me when we had nothing. We had nothing and she was still giving. I mean, come on, tell me, you know, the type of person who gives even when she has less, the type of person who would take kids in when she can barely feed her 2 kids. And that was God working through her.
So your mother is, what did you say in the very beginning in your native language?
Oh, K.
Say that again.
K.
So that was her mother having the pure heart, the blessings from the mother's pure heart. And I have to tell you, I have met her mother, I have met Robert, and they are 2 of the most phenomenal people that you can meet. Just loving, giving, caring, friendly. And I remember when these 2 got married, her mother brought out, I should have worn my African, she brought me an African shirt. I should have worn it, but doesn't go with the collar. Thanks, Dorothy. But anyway, that type of example. That probably is a little more updated hut than you lived in.
Yeah.
That was probably a little bigger or smaller or what?
And I also remember mud houses too, just houses made out of mud. They'll take the mud and let it dry, pile it on top of each other.
Your hut, were the sticks running up and down?
It was up and down. It was something, I remember Robert just digging it in the ground just so we can have shelter, and he'll find big leaves to go in between it. That looks a little bit nicer than.
Oh.
Wow. That looks nicer than
That looks a little bit nicer than what we were in. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Taking my breath away. So you talked about your mother, and you had mentioned a time where you ran. You didn't see her for days. You didn't know what was going on. Tell us the story behind that. Why did she not let you know?
You know, when you think about a country like that, I think my mother didn't want to take any chances, right? She has a plan. She knows she needs to do this. And she didn't want anyone else to know. She didn't want anything to stop her chance of getting to the United States. Because you think about everyone's in the same situation. Some people are envious. They will kill you if they know that you're trying to leave and do better. You know, it's almost like, why are you doing better and I'm here struggling, right? I think of all of those little kids and families that are still there.
You told me a story about a woman who was going to come to America and what happened to her.
Everyone knew she was going to come, and she ended up not waking up the next day.
Not waking up.
Yes.
That's the nice way of putting. Right. Okay, so now you're getting ready. You find out your mother's been in America. She's gotten political asylum so she can stay in America. And she calls for you to come over. You had said that you and Robert both got all dressed up. You got to the top because you walked up the gangplank, right?
Right.
To get to the airplane.
Gradually gets nice when you come to the United States.
And you get to the top, and what happens?
And Robert didn't follow me. But Robert knew he wasn't coming. And he got dressed because he knew I wouldn't come without him. He knew it. He knew I wouldn't leave him. So he got ready, like he was going. We're going. He was excited. He was pumping me up. We're going to see mommy. And we got to the plane. And I started walking out. And I got to the top. And I turned around, and he was at the bottom. And he said, "It's not my time." And he knew it wasn't his time.
He called you Noosh.
Noosh.
Noosh. What made you, or what do you think happened? Why did you get on the plane and not go back down to Robert?
At that moment, with everything happening, with my mom being in the United States and making a way, I knew it was God. And I knew in my heart I would see him again. I just didn't know when. But I knew in my heart, I knew it. I knew I would see him again. I just didn't know when. And he's made so much sacrifices for me.
So as a little girl in Africa, had to board a plane on her own to go to some place you've never been, and it sounds like a lot what we talked about last week about being obedient, knowing she was supposed to go, but she still could have chose to go or not go. You told me a funny story about what Robert had told you about African women in America. Can you share that story?
So weird, my mom's in America. Robert's like, every black person that goes to America turns white.
Say that again.
He says every black person that goes to America turns white. So when you meet mommy, she's gotta be white. And so I was like, really? I was so confused. And so finally got to the States, and she's waiting for me. You know, I come out, and white lady walked by, and I'm looking at her. Like, is that my mom? But I see her in front of me, and I knew that was my mom. But my brother completely messed with my head. And then she says something in our dialect. I'm like, okay, that's her. I need to call her. She called me. And so, yeah, she wasn't white. She's not white.
So now you're reunited with your mother.
Yes.
And you're living outside of Washington, D.C. in Gaithersburg, Maryland.
Yep.
Now, for those of you who don't know, my wife is from Gaithersburg, Maryland. A little bit before the time she was there, but what a coincidence that, well, I don't believe in coincidences, but anyway, here she's in Gaithersburg, Maryland. My wife had grown up in Gaithersburg, Maryland. You're in D.C. in the area, and you said a family. Just Give me more about what they did.
So I met a family through a friend, and her husband was a scientist. He did DNA for the government in DC. And at the time, she had 3 kids. I don't remember exactly if it was 3 or 4. But she was a single mom. She was struggling. Her husband wasn't home. And so I offered to help just so I can have a safe place. We came from Africa to DC, but there was also a struggle. Like you have to work hard to get where you want to get. It's walks of life, nothing comes easy, right? So I told her, I said, okay, well, you don't have to charge me if I can come over every single day and you feed me, watch the kids, just so I wasn't alone and my time was being spent a good way, right? Because when your parents are working, right, and you're home by yourself, bad things tend to happen, right? Decisions and things. So, my mom kind of talked to her and they came up with this deal. And so I just kind of cling to that family. They became my family. Helped her with the kids, and it's awesome. So after I've been helping them all these years, they were just like, like, this is awesome. Do you know how much we would have paid for childcare or someone to watch the kids? You've been a true blessing in our lives. And they obviously heard my story, and they said, not only did you teach our kids that it doesn't matter your circumstance or your situation or where you come from, you've taught them to just be a good person towards people in general. And so when I was going to graduate, I was going to actually stay in DC. And I guess they have been praying about it and talked to my mom and say, we think you should go to Utah. We're willing to give you $11,000, pay your first two-year tuition to Weber State University. And after 2 years, you're kind of on your own. But I'm like, why Utah? It's not even on the map where it is. I remember looking for it. I'm like, they're trying to send me away, middle of nowhere. But it was a blessing. I met my husband here. I mean, it was supposed to happen. And so, obedience. And so I came to Utah. I took that leap of faith. You know what? I had nothing to lose. God has already shown what he can do from the beginning of when I was in Africa, what he did to my mother and my brother, and now we're here. So if he says go, I'm going, even though I was a little bit nervous, I was going to be the only Black person here, but I wasn't in Utah. I found some people. Now it's getting a little bit more diverse, but I did it. There was nothing to lose no more. And, once we get on our knees, that's it. And that was really my safe place. My mother always told me, when there's no one around and you have no hope and there's nothing you can do, you get on your knees and you pray and you will find the answer. That's what she told me. Till this day, I'm 33 years old. I call her and she's like, have you prayed? I'm like, oh gosh, I'm just calling. She's awesome.
Tell us about some of the lessons that your mother taught you about the struggles.
Oh, man. She taught me a lot of lessons, but some of the ones, one of the ones that stood out to me is when I came to the States, I just couldn't process why there was poor people. Like, I couldn't process it because in Africa, when there's no food, there's no grocery store, there is no storehouse to go to get food, right? You can't stand in line because there's no rain, the crops is not growing, everyone's starving, right? It's not only certain people, were all hungry. So when I came to the United States, I just couldn't process why there was poor people. I could not, like, my brain, it wouldn't click why there was poor people. And my mom sat me down and she's like, you have to understand that struggle is struggle, right? And she's like, it's unfortunate that we went through war and we were in a country where, you know, a lot of people were starving, but it doesn't change someone that's going through a drug addiction. It doesn't change someone that's going through some mental health or depression. They're all struggling in their own way. That is that person's internal war. And so not only do you have to show empathy, but you have to understand that that person is battling their war. Just like you were in Africa. It's the same. There is no different level. You're not better. It makes sense. I got it. Then I started to show empathy. And I started to care more about people's stories and their lives. And it's good for people to share their stories and talk about their lives, because that's what makes us who I am. I'm sitting here today because of what I went through. And so, I mean, I'm very highly favored. I can say that all day. I would dance it across this room.
Ooh,
You know?
dance. Now there's going to be liturgical dancing. Stay tuned. You had mentioned a lot about this. Can you, about prayer and what prayer has meant and done and getting on your knees. Can you explain that a little more in your life, your mother's life, your family life? Explain that.
Prayer is powerful. Prayer is all that I remember. You know, I have situations at work. I grab my husband's hands. I'm like, we need to get on our knees because I'm struggling. These people are crazy. You know, I need to pray about this so I can forgive someone tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? So, but prayer is what I know. Prayer is what got me here. Prayer is why my mother is here. Prayer is why my brother is here. Prayer is why I'm sitting in this church chair right now. Prayer is why I married this amazing man. Prayer is why I have all of my kids. You know, I couldn't process at the time why my mother was holding our hands praying until I had my kids. And I said, oh my gosh, it makes sense. Prayer is powerful. It is powerful and it is real. And it is the reason why I'm here today.
Can you put the slide back up of Africa? I want to show you what is going to make some more sense. I'd mentioned that my wife grew up in Gaithersburg, Maryland, where she ended up in Gaithersburg, Maryland, before she went to Utah. But if you look up there, you'll see Gambia, a little thin orange strip. Can you point that out? The Gambia, right there. In the middle of Senegal. That's where, when I said I didn't want to go to Africa, that's where I ended up. Now, if you see how close that is to Liberia in West Africa, they had the same bishop, same everything for that whole region. So we were not too far from Liberia. And that's where I met my wife, Paula, that we ended up getting married and having 4 amazing boys. But Reta has mentioned prayer. And I have to tell you that my wife and I, when all through the 4 boys' life, we would always pray for their spouses. And hearing Rita's story makes me believe that while my wife and I were praying for my son's spouse, she was being chased by rebels in Africa. Not realizing that the prayers we were praying impacted what took place years later. So we have prayed for all 4 of our boys for wives. My oldest son, Jacob, has married a Latin, beautiful lady. My son, Zachary, has married an awesome African. My 3rd son, Jedediah, has married a country girl. And my 4th son is not married yet, and we're praying for an Asian. So we're very diversified. But we've been praying for our boys, for their wives, from the time they were born on through. And we're still praying for Caleb and his wife for the right one to come along. So when we hear your stories and you talk about how much prayer means to you and how it's changed things and why you're even here because of prayer and what God has answered the prayer for you, it leads us to go, wow, we were just praying that our boys would marry godly women, not that you were sparing them from the rebels at the time we're praying. So God moves in mysterious, miraculous ways. He does things that we may not see until we get to the other side of eternity. But God is always moving. And as we talked about last week, obedience. And this week you're hearing about the blessings that come from obedience. If she had never moved to Utah, she would have never met my son. Wouldn't have two amazing grandkids. I wouldn't know her and be blessed with her and my son. The family they have is amazing. So getting in a car back in 1986 and driving to Pittsburgh changed my whole life. The blessings that come through obedience. You cannot begin to imagine what God is doing in the heavenly realms because of obedience, because of prayer. And God wants to do more for us than we're probably even willing to have him want us to do for us. He's more willing to do. He's more willing to give. He's more willing to share than we can even begin to imagine. And I get the privilege of looking back 30 years and saying those prayers that I was praying for my son was really for Reta being chased by rebels. So the act of obedience is one that is monumental, sometimes difficult, sometimes scary. Sometimes you got to get on a plane and leave your brother. But look at the rewards. Her brother's in America. Going to be a doctor, surgeon, he said. Surgeon.
He's in medical school right now.
He's in medical school right now.
Got accepted into Harvard, took some classes there.
Wow. And to think that God had this already laid out, just waiting on us to say, yes, Lord. Yes,